M3GAN is directed by Gerald Johnstone and stars Allison Williams, Violet McGraw, and Amy Donald. A robotics engineer at a toy company builds a lifelike doll that begins to take on a sinister life of its own. I'll be completely transparent, I expected to despise this movie for a myriad of reasons. One, it's a January movie. And for those of you who don't know, January is the place where films go to die. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because the Academy every year throughout every Oscar season is so busy in January looking over all the films that for every single January release, they're like, I know that's supposed to come out around October or December, but that doesn't really look good, and we got all this, so just throw it over in that first of the month. And along with that, not only was this the first movie of January, but it was also a PG-13 horror movie about a killer doll. This could only end up in failure in my eyes. I thought the trailers for this movie looked so stupid, so bad, and so hilariously idiotic that I expected to go into this movie, absolutely hate it in my heart, but in my mind just have a whole lot of fun with how stupid it was. And it actually wasn't that bad. In fact, it was kind of good. There are problems with the movie for sure, but overall, walking out of this movie theater, I was basically in complete shock by the fact that there were way more good things about this movie than there were bad things. I think the first thing that we can pinpoint about being really good about this movie is the acting, because everyone does a really good job in this movie. Violet McGraw is great as this little kid Katie who's gone through this horrible traumatic experience and slowly but surely opens up to become a bit too attached to M3GAN. Allison Williams, I loved in Get Out, and she does almost as good a job in this movie as she did in that film. And the dual performance of Amy Donald and Jenna Davis as the body and voice of M3GAN respectively are absolutely incredible in this movie and really do bring M3GAN, this horrifying new horror villain, to life. Amy Donald masters this perfect mix of 50% humanoid movements and 50% very robotic movements to really make M3GAN feel like she's from the uncanny valley and makes her so much more creepier. And Jenna Davis's voice performance, going from very compassionate but still lightly robotic in the beginning of the movie to very demanding and very aggressive in the latter half of the movie, is just really good. And by the last parts of the movie where she's talking to Allison Williams' character, I thought she was so creepy and she did such a good job along with Amy Donald. They really lean into that uncanny valley look of M3GAN really well, and what they do even more well is lean into just how silly the concept is itself. The movie almost expects all of this mockery towards it, so instead of trying to be something extremely serious, it does go for something that is not a 100% comedy or even like Scream satire, but still self-aware enough to get like a lot of laughs. Actually, scratch that, a lot of intentional laughs. A lot of the jokes in this movie are really funny, especially in how that comedy correlates with just making fun of toy companies in general and how just absurd a lot of toy commercials are nowadays, and toys in general. And along with that, the movie also has a lot of good commentary in it as well, not just about toy companies, but also about parenting. This movie brings up a lot of interesting discussions about how much we allow children to be raised by technology nowadays more than the actual parent themselves, and how during a period of growth, the child can often grow more attached to the technology than they do to the parent who's actually supposed to be raising them. It's actually very interesting, and while a bit on the nose at times, done very well overall. And once we get to the kills in this movie, they're okay. Yeah, the kills in this movie are just kind of okay. They're not bad, but they're not really so over-the-top hilariously great that I'm gonna remember each one of them. But as they are in the movie, they are good. And that does lead me into the problems with this movie, and it all starts with the tone. The tone in this movie is all over the place. A lot of the time, the movie tries to be this very self-aware comedy, but also it tries to be this very self-serious horror movie, while also trying to be this very family-oriented drama. And sometimes it does mix, but a lot of times it just can't. The tone a lot of the time is just water and oil. We go from this very serious family-oriented drama with Allison Williams' character and Violet McGraw's character to Ronnie Cheng's CEO character just saying every single one of his lines as over-the-toply as he can. And while one of those could do well for an entire film, mixing them, not so much. Also, while I stand by a PG-13 horror movie can be done really well and exercise restraint masterfully like 1408 did or A Quiet Place did, this was clearly not a movie where restraint was very key in the horror. And because of that, it really does feel like this movie was going for an R rating. But the studio, fearing that January was the time where they had to get the most butts in seat, just censored a lot of this movie and made it PG-13. And I don't just mean that the blood and gore is tamed down, I mean that there is a lot of language in this movie where... Do you know on those TV channels when they're showing like an R-rated movie and instead of just cutting out a curse word, they'll dub over it even though you can obviously see that the actor's mouth says something completely different than what you're hearing? Yeah, there are a lot of times in this movie where that does happen, and while sometimes it's not distracting, other times they give those moments close-ups. And finally, there are quite a few plot holes in the movie that if you really wanted to really get into this movie, you could just separate bit by bit and this movie would suddenly become really bad. The most obvious in my eyes being that since M3GAN is just supposed to be this best friend, this artificial best friend for kids, then how does she have so much control over the technological environment around her? To be fair, they did the same thing in the new Child's Play remake, but in that film, at least they drew attention to it and called it out early on that that was one of Chucky's powers. In this, they don't really say that. So we're just meant to just come up with the idea of, oh, she has wireless capabilities. And along with that, controlling an Alexa is one thing, but in the latter half of the movie, actually no, the last third of the movie, she just controls a car. Was it an electronic car? I don't know. With plot holes like that, you could just rip this movie to shreds. But in all honesty, by doing that, you're just sort of missing out on the truth. And the real truth is, from a big picture perspective, there are a lot more good things about this movie than there are bad things. And that truly should be commended. The acting from the whole cast is really good, the self-awareness and commentary elements are handled well, and M3GAN is a legitimately good horror villain. But the mix of tones can often clash, the studio censoring can be very obvious at times, and there are quite a few plot holes throughout the film. If this movie is any indication of how good or bad of a year 2023 is gonna be for film, I would say that honestly, we're in good hands. I'm going to give M3GAN a B. Just saying that sentence amazes me. Well guys, thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments down below, what is your favorite creepy doll in horror films? For me, even though Chucky might be up there, there is no question as to who I think is the freakiest. Look at those eyes, they follow you. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are the best, and don't forget to click subscribe and click the bell icon to stay up to date on all things movie, all things TV, all things nerd.